everyone, welcome to the latest episode of The Reconstructionist. It's Bo and Karina, and today we have a special guest in studio, Lisa Kern. Lisa is the author of a couple books, but she's the author of Confessions of a People Pleaser. She's also one of my dear, dear friends. I love her so, so much. And this week we're going to be talking about books that have helped us heal. And this one is absolutely one that has helped me. And we wanted to be able to bring her on so that she could speak to it from the author's perspective as well.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I think I'm still digesting the fact that it's considered a book that helps people heal. So thank you, because I tear up thinking about that. So seriously, thank you. And thank you both for having me today.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for being on.
Yeah.
I was trying to get that in there, but I was a little slow on the draw. So bear with me, everyone.
No problem. So Lisa, do you want to talk about maybe a little bit of the background of the book and what is it that kind of inspired you to write it?
So Confessions started as a book that I had, just that I would share some stories occasionally with people and they're like, wow, that's crazy. You should write a book. Or after my mom died and I realized that it took me decades to process that emotion, somebody was like, you should write a book. So I was hearing it, and writing was always very cathartic and therapeutic for me. But it wasn't until I was halfway through the book, or probably 4 chapters in, that I realized, okay, I don't want this just to be about me. This is not an autobiography. I want it to be able to be beneficial to other people.
Okay.
Because part of my healing journey happened when I could see myself in other people's stories. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started to add the lessons and reflections at the end of every chapter. So even though it's my story, take a minute to digest that, and can you apply it to something in your life? So that's kind of where the concept came from.
And that's something that I actually really appreciated from the book, because it was very much this is what happened to me, and this is where my experiences have formed me as a person. But then also it was like, all right, this is what I learned. How can you use it for yourself too? And
right.
Even though admittedly I didn't necessarily write out all the prompts, but I absolutely stopped and reflected afterwards.
If you can even stop and think, or even just pick one that resonates with you and think on that. Because I think, not everybody journals. And even if you don't put pen to paper, you can stop and think, oh yeah, it's a different perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So it could be called Perspectives of a People Pleaser. It doesn't have to be Confessions.
I like that too.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to confess right now for everyone, I haven't read the book yet. So let me throw that out there.
Lots of confessions happening today.
Yes, lots of confessions. Karina has put on my radar. It is going to be on my to-read list very soon. But I just want to pick up on something you said there. Are there prompts, like writing prompts or thinking prompts in the book?
Yeah, at the end of every chapter, there are journal prompts, lessons and reflections. So, a little tidbit, if you didn't have time to read the whole book, you can kind of go to the reflections and say, okay, these are the key takeaways from the chapter. And it's not a book that you have to read sequentially. You can read, you can just pick up a chapter and be like, there's one on body image, there's one on self-care, there's one on authenticity. So you can kind of just pick a chapter that speaks to you and hopefully put something away.
It's honestly wonderful. And I was telling her beforehand, I feel like it's especially beneficial to those who have been raised in high control groups, because part of that high control is that lack of boundaries and that people-pleasing aspect, and making sure that you don't offend other people, that you're always there. And when someone offers you an assignment, you have to say yes, because it's a blessing to be able to have an assignment. And you really get taken from you that idea of being able to create personal boundaries.
Yeah. You sacrifice all your autonomy.
It doesn't have.
So that was, for me, the thing that really attracted me to your book, was the fact that I knew that I needed to work on boundaries. I knew I was a people pleaser. So it was very much like, okay, how can I make sure that I create those boundaries? And then I also love that it was living authentically, because also I feel like as people who were raised under those conditions, you don't get to live authentically.
Right. You're hiding your true self. You're just trying to conform and fit in and do what you're told. And you don't often take that time to say, what do I want? Who am I at my core? What would I do if I got to choose? If you don't get those choices, right?
Nail, head.
Yeah. Super true. And I don't want to keep rewinding here, but I just really appreciated what you said about when you were sharing your story with other people, and then you started hearing their stories as well back, and then that became part of the book as well. I think sometimes, I think we all go back and forth on this as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, where you hear a lot of people say, like, I don't even, like, I don't want to talk about it. And maybe that's their way of dealing with what they've been through or their experience. But I think something amazing happens when you do like open up and start sharing that, just like what happened with you, is where you start hearing other people's stories back, even if they were never a Jehovah's Witness. And you'll find that on some level, people can relate to you. And I think there's so much of when you're willing to share your story and hear and really listen to other people's stories when they speak to you. I just feel like it's a huge part of the thinking process and just processing everything, the healing, and just realizing that so many people have a similar experience, even if it's not the same experience. So
I think
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was agreeing. Just a huge part of the healing journey is realizing that you're not alone. And because we don't always talk about it, we live in this repeated story that we are alone. We're the only one going through this. And then we spiral into that like shame and guilt of feeling bad and feeling different when really we're just not talking about it. Probably that's what most people say the most about the book is, wow, you're so brave. I can't believe you shared that. And I'm trying to make people not feel alone because, again, it was in reading other people's stories because I was a decade late in seeking out therapy that I realized, oh, that's where this comes from. That's where these behaviors come from. And I think because we're not taught that in school. When you hear it from somebody else's perspective, but you can apply it to yourself, it's those little baby steps of, because you can't change something you don't know is wrong.
That's true.
So it has to start with acknowledgement.
Yeah.
You know?
She just said something that I thought was really interesting, that she was a decade late in seeking therapy. And that's something that actually kind of affects ex-JWs as well, because within the organization, therapy and mental health services are not encouraged. They might say like, okay, yeah, go. But truthfully, it's not encouraged. It's very much encouraged to be taken care of. Go to the elders, pray about it, go to Jehovah. So when you leave, not only do you have all that baggage, but then you don't know how to process it either. So I think that it's really beautiful that you, on another, even though it's not that same religious aspect, you can still resonate with, hey, it took me a while to start getting help.
There was a stigma, right? Regardless of where the stigma came from. I had this stigma that like talk was weak, or like because I had a dad that didn't know how to show emotions, that wasn't modeled to me. So it wasn't familiar. And when something's not familiar, but your body, your subconscious mind is like, this isn't safe. Red flag, So I think it's just crucial to learn. I think it should be taught in school, like elementary school, how to process big feelings.
Yeah.
Right? Like why isn't this in the curriculum?
Inside Out 1 and 2 required watching.
Yeah.
They
hopefully it gains traction. I know there's like a lot of people that want to introduce more like therapeutic type practices into like early childhood education or even mindfulness and meditation into like first grade, kindergarten, and those early years, because it's like those are valuable skills.
Probably now more than ever too, because they're so distracted with technology, right? Like we don't quiet the mind ever, really ever. Yeah.
So Lisa, knowing that, and now knowing anyway, because we were confirming it to you, that your book has genuinely helped people heal and grow from things that maybe they thought they would never be able to move past. Like how does that make you feel?
I don't know that there's a word to describe like how my heart expands hearing that, because again, like I started writing that book for myself, not thinking that maybe if one person could see themselves in it, then it was already worth it. But knowing that it's helping groups of people that wasn't even on my radar. Again, I wish I could find the right word for it, but what's coming to me is like the ripple effect of healing is that, we might think we are more effective with our megaphones and screaming from the rooftops and wanting to change everybody's mind. But really, in my heart, I believe that if we can do our own personal development our own inner work, take care of our own energetic vibration, or whatever you want to call it, we're raising ourselves up. People see the change in you and they're like, what did you do? And if all I said was, I read some books and I went to therapy, and somebody else says, well, I'm going to try that too. And then now they change the trajectory of their children's path because they're not reliving what they had gone through. Does that make sense? It's the ripple effect of healing. So that's what comes to mind of how it can affect people, is like, again, if it changes that one person and that changes how they're seeing themselves, their self-worth, their self-confidence, and that's going to then affect their children or their friend group or their relationships. Even start
like with generational trauma. That is where it starts being fixed, with that one person deciding, oh, I don't like that, all of this keeps going through and making me feel this way. I need to be the one to make a change. And then that just makes they are the change maker, quite literally.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think I saw it that way. So thank you for giving me that power.
And one thing that Lisa she knows this so near and dear to. I love this woman so much. Oh my goodness. And I've actually had certain services with her. She's a Reiki practitioner, and in kind of one of my sessions with her, I had this moment where I realized, like, oh, healing is not linear. It's not going to be a thing where I'm just okay, like boom, I'm done. And that was huge to me, and kind of ended up becoming my own mantra with my friends. Like, healing is not linear. Like, do not judge yourself when if you start to regress, because things can trigger it. That
moment was just as powerful for me, seeing you connect the dots, and it inspired the last chapter in the book. You know that it starts with you, if it's okay to say. Because it was such an aha moment of, the point isn't to get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm healed, the work is done, and now I'm just perfect for the rest of my life. Like, that's obviously not the point. Like, there's light, there's darkness, there's ups, there's downs. We are living, right? But once you realize that, it's just a next layer of healing, and then there's going to be something else, and then now you're coming at from your higher self, and you're better able to deal with these issues as they arise, not from your wounded self, but from your new healed version. And life is still going to happen, but it's how you react to it going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a big part of it is that, right? It's if you read a book like yours, and it at least it's not like it fixes the negative aspects of your people pleasing tendencies, right? Like, it's fixed and now I'm done. I read this book, but at least raises your awareness. So then, 3 months down the road, you're doing something and it's not serving you and it's not right. And then you at least, because you've read a book like yours and done some work on yourself, you have that awareness, and the light bulb goes off. And like, oh, I've fallen back into that pattern again, and I need to step back and reset. And it's so much of life, right? Where it's not like we get rid of these patterns and then we're fixed most of the time. We pull ourselves out and then we fall back in, and we just
you're constantly working to rewire.
But at the same time, it's kind of like a graph where the line is going up, right? It's getting better, but there's drops, and it goes up a little bit more and it drops, and it just kind of slowly makes that progress. And I just think that's good, like, for people to think about too. I think sometimes we're so impatient with ourselves, and our tendency is, when we do, regress or we fall back in the old patterns, just start like beating ourselves up. Like, I thought I was no longer going to be this people pleaser type person or whatever it is, and like, but the truth is that's probably always going to be a part of our personality. And all we can do is just, chip away at it and just try to make, incremental progress along the path.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think it's so important for when that you're on that journey of healing things and making yourself a better person, making sure that you look for resources, because there are going to be times where it's going to be harder for us to pull ourselves up, but knowing, all right, I know that I have, this book, this specific chapter of this book is something that's going to be able to, elevate me, or I know that I can access my mental health counselor, like making sure that whatever the resources are that we know work for us, that we use them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
And admittedly, for everyone out there, and Bo and I have mentioned this before, we're not mental health counselors, and we are just talking about the things that have helped us individually and helped us get to a life where we just feel happier and more peaceful overall.
Yeah, I think anybody that's like seen 3 minutes of my content anywhere will realize that I'm definitely not a mental health counselor, but that's funny. Yeah, like we're not trying to, ever put on that outfit and try to act like we're gurus or mental health experts by any means. So we're just like trying to point people towards resources, right? That's kind of a big part of it. Just this is what's helped us. Hopefully, it helps you too. If not, try something else. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
And I know that it's been a wonderful resource for me. Lisa, do you want to talk about maybe some places that you can be found if anyone wants to?
Yeah, thank you. So the book is on Amazon and also on my website. My website is healthyholistichappy.com. And I hang out on Instagram at reiki.body.mind. And I am the host of Reiki Body Mind podcast as well. So those are probably the most common places to find me.
So if anyone is interested in learning any bits that have absolutely helped me along my journey, those are the few resources that you can absolutely reach out to. And then we've also talked about other things that we've done. I've mentioned my life coaching that I had worked on with someone. My yoga, actually, Lisa was also my inspiration for starting yoga and becoming a yoga teacher as well. So all of these things for me personally have really been beneficial and helping me see my value, my worth, and recognizing it's okay to put boundaries up.
Mm-hmm. And do you have anything you're working on right now as far as are any projects you're excited about, Lisa? And if the answer is no, that's fine. I was just curious.
Yeah, I do. I didn't know how much to share here because I didn't want to make up my platform, but
go on.
It kind of it definitely ties in with the book. Starting, I don't know when this will air, but open for enrollment September 1st, but starting September 15th will be a 6-week group coaching program called Worthy. So finding that inner confidence, inner self-worth, working on a lot of self-love, and the primary concept of the program is to identify and then release limiting beliefs that we don't even know are there. So it's a lot of subconscious reprogramming to work on that authenticity and finding your confidence and self-worth.
Honestly, that sounds like something that I feel like a lot of
I already signed you up.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, yes, please. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to any of our listeners out there, we are absolutely going to put the information for that up. 100%. Oh my goodness. I will be a part of that. Absolutely. Because I've done other courses that Lisa has put out there as well on chakra healing, where we went through each of the 7 chakras and very in depth for it. I just love this woman.
Thank you. Oh, I feel it. I feel love. Thank you.
I'm going to read your book very soon, so it's going to happen. So
I love that. And Bo, just a disclaimer, I obviously didn't have in mind that it would be a book that men would read, but I have to say I've had at least 3 or 4, so small percentage, right? Because I'm writing my story. So, but I have had men reach out first to be like, I was kind of just curious about the female mind, but second, I didn't know how much it was going to help me. So that was really great feedback that I wasn't expecting. So I hope that you find a little wisdom nugget.
Great. And if there's any other men watching this or listening, just read the book. Stop being such a dude, would you? Just stop. You're a people pleaser. Just figure it out, okay? Read the book.
That's it. You are.
Don't read it to just try to figure out the mind of a woman. Work on yourself. I'm sure there's I know I'm going to read the book and there's going to be so much that's going to hit me, like I said, because that's definitely my personality. So I feel like that's something I'm constantly struggling with is setting boundaries and
And it's
you
tough
know,
because everybody loves a good people pleaser, right?
yeah.
We're very kind and very giving and very attentive,
Mm-hmm.
dependable, and it's
Yeah.
great for everybody else. And I think that's a tough realization too, is when you start to change yourself, those toxic people won't like it because you
Mm-hmm.
are setting boundaries. And that can be hard for a people pleaser to stick with the boundaries once you get that pushback, because we're
Oh, yeah.
so used to like pleasing others. It's a really it's a process that you have to come
Yeah.
back
And
to,
and if you're trying to like leave a group, or call it whatever you want to call it, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you have a people pleaser personality, like you are literally, for me, it was disappointing everyone in my life at that point, like letting everyone down. And that's like the worst feeling you can have if you have a people pleaser personality. Like I literally like to take care of myself, I have to at this point displease and disappoint everyone in my life. And I think a lot of us live with like residual guilt. I know it bubbles up for me about that still, where it's like, even though I have no regrets and I feel like that was the best decision I ever made, but that guilt will still come up of of just knowing that people are still saddened by my absence in the group, and it's like, ooh, so there's a lot to process there.
what's
So
coming up
yeah.
to mind for me too with that is like, aside from the guilt or the shame that you guys feel with that, is like, from the identity level, you must have had to process like, who am I without this?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a whole other healing process too.
Yeah. Because for this particular organization, they'll also say like, oh, Catholics are only Catholics, when they go to church. They only really practice when they do. We are, Jehovah's Witness 24th. That is our identity. So when you suddenly
Who are you without
stop,
it?
exactly, when you're taught this is your actual culture, not your, where you come from and your ancestral ties, that, that's nice, that's fine, but this is your culture. This is who you are. And then suddenly you are not, even though in your mind you haven't been. That sort of,
It's a disconnect.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult.
True. I don't know if Lisa's trying to sign off, and I keep going here, like, or if are you gonna stick around, or you
I know
have
you
to
guys
go?
have other books to talk about too. So if we want to,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Lisa, thank you so
Yes,
much.
Thank you.
Oh my
pleasure.
goodness.
Thank you
This
so
was
much.
this was awesome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes, yeah. It was nice to have like a sane voice on the podcast. No, I'm joking. Karina's sane too.
Balance each other out.
Lisa, thank you again so much.
Yeah. Check it out, everyone. Check out Lisa's
Love
work.
it. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
That was our interview with author Lisa Kern. Again, this is her book, Confessions of a People Pleaser. And she did mention all the places where we can find her. I don't recall them all off the top of my head, even though I know I have her on all my socials. We're absolutely going to link them. She is a wonderful human being. And if anyone is interested in that 6-week course that she was talking about, enrollment, she mentioned, starts on September 1st, and the class itself starts September 15th.
That's right. Look, everyone. You don't have 5 weekly meetings anymore, so do a class
You have time now.
that'll actually benefit you. You don't even have to go to a Kingdom Hall. Like, you can just from home. Take a
and they're not
class
even going to make you feel bad if you Zoom about it.
They're going to make you feel good. She's going to make you feel good about yourself. Imagine that, rather than guilting you into preaching more. So I'd check it out. I'm going to go on her website and check it out. That's for sure.
She's
I feel like I need
you're
to
gonna love
learn
it.
to
10
love
out of 10.
myself. I need to learn to love myself.
Can I just say something genuinely? And she was a person who, got me started with my yoga and my Reiki and all of that. And then just very much helped me learn that all these things that make me feel good and there's nothing wrong with it, because a lot of it is stuff that, we were taught that demons get away, blah, blah, blah. So, and then you have someone like Lisa, and you see just like this light that comes through her. It's like, there is no way that what you guys taught about all of this is how it actually is. And I think it's
Doesn't
Go
seem to be
ahead.
possessed by demons to me.
No, no,
It's just-
no. If anything, beautiful little
Yeah.
coincidences. So the reason I wore yellow is, if anyone reads her book, you will see why I wore yellow today.
Okay.
And then yesterday, coincidentally, was my birthday. Some of my friends took me to
How did I miss
yesterday.
this? Happy birthday. The worst co-host friend ever. Oh my God. I
Yesterday,
haven't been to Facebook, so maybe. Oh, you're not on Facebook. Are you on Facebook?
I'm not
Oh,
on
okay,
Facebook.
okay.
I'm not on Facebook, so you didn't get the little reminder.
Yeah, I'm still a Jehovah's
I'm-
Witness in that respect. I just ignore people's birthdays.
So some of my friends took me sunflower picking
Oh.
yesterday. There was this event, and when Lisa came here this morning, because she knew had been my birthday, she brought a sunflower plant, and she goes, "I know it was your birthday. I just didn't know when." And I wanted, and she brought me a beautiful plant. And I was like, "Oh, Lisa!" I thought she had seen that we went sunflower, but she had no idea.
No idea.
She
Huh.
had no idea that literally yesterday we went sunflower picking, and today she brought me a beautiful, huge sunflower plant. And so,
That's
you know,
amazing.
just cute little connections like
Yeah,
that.
quantum entanglement there.
You know,
Interesting.
yeah. I be into all this stuff, you guys. You
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
So yes, we're going to be talking about books that help us heal. We talked about one.
Sure. Yeah, we got Lisa's book. I'll make a confession, everybody, because we're on the topic of confessions today. I love to read great poetry, and I really love to write very poor poetry. So, at some point, I will share one maybe at some point just to torture everyone of mine. But, anyways, a poet that I really appreciate, I would say he's like a poet slash philosopher, is David White. And if you haven't heard of him, I would encourage you to check him out. Any of his books, really. I'm going to highlight one, but any of his poetry books, I'd say a lot of his poetry is very pragmatic. A lot of it is beautiful. It's beautiful prose, but it's also contains like almost therapeutic elements to it. Things are just, I think, psychologically beneficial, and that you can it's like poems you can take and put into action in your life, and not just for beauty in of itself. So that said, this is David White. This is a collection called River Flow, and I'm going to read one of the poems. I'm going to try to do it some justice. I'm not a professional poetry reader, everyone, but maybe you can get an idea. And this is a poem that had a big impact in my life, and I'm going to read it, and then maybe I'll even remember why it had an impact in my life. So the poem's called Start Close In. And this is how it goes. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way to begin the conversation. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To hear another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes a private ear that can really listen to another. Start right now. Take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing close in, the step you don't want to take. So, yeah. So that's a poem for me that had a huge impact, just because it's really an invitation just to focus in, like he's saying, in on yourself. Try to tune into your own voice, your own questions. Kind of ties in with Lisa's book, actually, right? And then you don't have to do anything heroic or huge or think so far down the road that everything becomes overwhelming. Just start right where you're at, and just take that simple first step, ask that simple question, and don't worry about what other people are saying or what other people are thinking. Just, figure out what you need for yourself, have that conversation with yourself, listen to yourself, and then take that bite-sized small step to get going on the path that unfolds before you.
Yeah, and I like how it mentioned that, like, it can be a step that you don't want, to. It's right there, but come on, just do it. Come on, you know.
Yeah.
That's the part.
Yeah, and I didn't read that poem as a Jehovah's. I read that as an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and
Hmm.
I realized in some ways I was still having conversations with Jehovah's Witnesses in my head, and to put it that way, and
Hmm.
I still had like their expectations and their thoughts and their questions in my head, and in some ways it was still, even though I was like free, so to
Hmm.
speak, there were still certain areas of my life where I felt paralyzed by it, and I wasn't willing to take that step.
Right.
So, and again, as we mentioned, talking to Lisa, it's not like that's fixed now. It still comes up. And I mean, I take that poem out and read it probably at least once a month. And just to remind myself, like, okay, is there a step in my life right now that I need to take that I'm afraid to take? And then how can I just like edge, just inch my foot forward and, and get
And
going?
get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not get there, but start.
Start. Yeah.
Yeah.
So David White, again, I'd recommend him to everybody. And he has other books that are like a blend of memoir and philosophy and ideas. That I just finished another one, and they're
Hmm.
excellent. It really just invites you to really reflect and to think about just all aspects of your life, and how engaged you are with your work, your relationships, and
Hmm.
with your relationship with yourself too. So that
Right.
that's
Right.
one I would recommend for everyone. How
Nice.
about you, Karina?
And I'm super annoyed because I couldn't find my copy of it, but there is a book that absolutely has helped me. It's called It Didn't Start With You, and
Mm,
it's about generational trauma and how it is that things that have happened in your family's line can manifest through you. And a lot of times it's like these anxieties that you don't know where they suddenly came from, things like that. It could be something that another family member had dealt with and maybe hadn't kind of had a full circle conclusion with. There was no closure from it. So and I'm so I had been searching for, I'm like, where is, because it was so beneficial for
mm,
me personally, because it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that maybe all of the stuff that I'm like going through and processing, maybe not all of it actually has to do with the organization. Yes, it all has to do
hmm.
with how I was raised, but not all of it is the organization. Is it a big part?
Yeah.
Yes. But genuinely, family ties and those relationships and,
Hmm.
and all of that plays a big role in you individually as well. So learning to differentiate the two as to
Hmm.
what was religious trauma and what was family trauma was very it was difficult because religion and family is so tied. So it's
Yeah.
hard to separate the two. But that book really helped me take an objective step back and say, okay,
Hmm.
this is stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with the organization. This is stuff that I'm dealing with because it's in my DNA. So
Hmm.
how can I turn this? So how can
Mm.
I make sure that it stops here? Um, that was so, like I said, the name of the book was it didn't start with you. The author of the book is Mark Wolin, I believe, is Wolin, Wollynn.
Okay.
Full name: How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle.
Mm.
um, 10 out of 10 would recommended it to a bunch of my friends as
Yeah.
well. Like I said, because learning to differentiate, because so many of us grew up in that, there's not a lot
Hmm.
of converts as adults, let's be real. What is culture from the organization, and
Hmm.
what is just, let's be real, the fucked up things that just happen in our family? and
Yeah.
and not saying that with any judgment towards my own, because every family has some fucked up
Mm.
shit that goes on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I think that's good too, because it's so easy to make the organization like the number one, like all encompassing boogeyman, right? That
yes.
all of my trauma stems from the fact that from the Jehovah's Witnesses organization. And I'm not, obviously not downplaying the trauma that people do suffer because of
Mhm.
the organization, but also chances are, even if our family wasn't in the organization, we would have come out with some type of trauma, right? Like there's a good chance. I mean, if I even just think about it for a moment and think about my grandparents and organization aside, just they just a lot of times, and probably had to do with the time and place they grew up in, right? And
Hmm.
their generational trauma that they inherited. But it's just, I think about that organization aside, and it's like, well, they were just like, they had no tools for showing emotion or
Hmm.
love and affection, even to their grandchildren. And so then, of course, my parents probably did better than they did, but still, like, had their limitations, right? And if I
Yep.
were to become a parent, I'd have my limitations, and I would,
Yep.
even though I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, I would still probably do things wrong and have some type of negative impact on my child as much as I would want to avoid that. So I just
Yes.
think I have to read the book. I haven't read it yet. That's also, everyone, bear with me. Like, I've
You're
been
like,
just
admittedly,
backlogged in books lately, and I'm trying to get caught up. And but that one's also on my list because it's something I want to explore myself. And I think it's a way to have like some grace for ourselves, right?
yeah.
And even our
100%.
family, because even if they have hurt us, at some point, maybe there's certain things that we can never forgive them for. That's okay. But I think to try to like have some grace and
I think that it did really do that for me because
mm,
I was able to kind of like take that step back and think about like, all right, what was the kind of stuff that was going on in my
hmm
family's life when this like organization presented itself. And
yeah,
with your old podcast that you had, Armageddon in retrospect, I had mentioned a little bit about like how it is that my I ended up in the organization, my family
hmm
ended up in the organization, and it started with my grandmother, who within the 70s, she had lost a child who was about 6 to 8 months old at that time. She was a grieving mother.
hmm
So, and she admittedly was someone who wasn't taught how to process emotion and express emotion. My
yeah,
A lot of the women in my family are very strong. That's how I'm
hmm
gonna, so it made me really stop and think what happened in her formative years
hmm
that made her this staunch individual, this
yeah,
who then was so broken by the loss of her child that she decided I need to see him again. This is the
mm,
only way. How?
mm,
And even though it caused division within her family throughout the years, it still ended up being that thing that she held on to.
hmm
So it makes me just stop and stop thinking about them as my family unit as they did all of this and it affects all of us. Da, da, da.
hmm
But they, at the end of the day, they really still did it because they found some benefit for them.
yeah, yeah.
So
Interesting. Mm,
trying to find that grace with yourself, but
yep.
the grace with your family as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
Mm.
So there's a good one for the read list for me. Um,
Mhm.
I'm going to highlight a book that I'm not going to do a excerpt from this book. This book is somewhat academically written, so have that in mind. There's definitely some very detailed notes and philosophical arguments that are brought up that are very academic in nature. But there's also just parts of this book that I just read it and I was like, "Fuck!" Just to think about it because it's in a good way, because it's heavy in a way, but it's also just super encouraging, and it uh, takes a lot of weight off of you too. I don't know if that makes sense. I know I'm saying it's heavy, but it's like the content is kind of heavy when you think about it. But
Okay.
then I don't know. Then it hits you that you're like, I can take so much pressure off of myself that I've inherited, whether it's through religion or culture or family, whatever it is. But let me get to it. I'm babbling on here. So it's called Finding Meaning in an Imperfect World by Ido Landau.
Mhm.
And it's just that. It's a book about finding meaning and what is meaning? What does it mean to have meaning in your life?
Mhm.
And then uh, there's a lot of arguments against perfectionism. So a perfectionist view of meaning that essentially I need to have this for my life to have meaning. I need to make this podcast, but not just this podcast. This podcast needs to impact the whole world for it to be meaningful. Like those types of views that we put
Mhm.
on ourselves. Like, I'm not
So
helping enough
limiting.
people. I need
So
to,
limiting.
yeah, and I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. And therefore my life is just pointless.
Mhm.
And he also goes through transition in there too about something we dearly value. Like when we're Jehovah's Witnesses in that context, we value, like that gave us meaning
Mhm.
and that set our values, things that, okay, if I believe this, and I do these things as Jehovah's Witness, my life therefore is meaningful.
Yep.
And then we lose that, and it leaves that vacuum of meaning in our lives. So he talks about transitions in there too, about basically having a life that we think is meaningful and then losing it. And then from there, just what are things that can reintroduce meaning into our life? And I think some people maybe transition right into religion from being
Mhm.
a Jehovah's Witness, where they're like, "Oh no, it's like I was born again and now I have Jesus." If that's your thing, I'm not here to knock that.
Yeah.
But for others of us, a lot of us, we're not just able to step into another like fully formed belief system,
Right.
and therefore, where can I like extract meaning? And and he talks about just the world being, as it mentions, an imperfect, broken place. And for some of us, that we think because it's that way, there's no meaning to be extracted. And, the idea that we're
Mhm.
just, oh, I'm just on this freaking rock, circling this other, the sun, and the
Mhm.
universe is infinite, and I'm gonna die, and people are gonna forget about me. All the stuff that we go through in our head, like he
Right.
tackles it in this book, and you realize that none of this means that my life is meaningless. Like there's still, even in the face of all that, your
Mhm.
life can have meaning, and the bar doesn't have to be set so high for it. There's like little tiny things you can do that will imbue your life with meaning. So I just want to recommend that if you're struggling like I have with having a sense of meaning
Mhm.
after leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, then I would recommend that book.
Pick
So,
it back up again. I want to see the title and all of that.
oh, there we go.
Finding Meaning in a Perfect Ito
Landau.
Landau. Okay.
Yep.
'Cause that's one I'm gonna want to read.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the book starts out, he's a college professor, and basically a girl in the class is in this philosophy class, and she just says, like, life is meaningless. So it starts out with him asking her, like, I think it's 3 or 4 questions
Mhm.
that changes her mind. And
Okay.
so that's kind of, it's like, oh, okay, it brings you in. You're like, oh, why don't I ask myself those questions, right? So I'm not gonna. I could have read those, but I'm gonna leave those. So,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
yeah, from there, I just feel like it can be a very beneficial book.
Okay. Okay. Cool. 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 Tight. 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 I'm definitely gonna look that one up because
Hmm.
it very much falls in line with all of the stuff that we've been
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about. It's almost like we have a theme for
Yes.
today's
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
You know.
It all piggybacks off of each other, right? Like all this
Yeah.
stuff is connected.
It really is. Um, the last book that I wanted to talk about, or even just like quickly bring up, is one tailored towards XJW's Leaving the Witness by Amber Scora. This book for me, I I saw myself in Amber
Mm.
very, very much. Third
Hmm.
generation Jehovah's Witness, learning a language in a marriage that was not, you know, what it seemed to be.
Hmm.
And then, well, there obviously differences in our story. I wasn't, in China. I was still here learning language, but still, I just thank you, Amber, for writing this book.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think she will
If
ever
you happen to watch or listen,
see
no,
the.
I would say the same thing.
No,
It's
no,
definitely one of my favorite Ex-Jehovah's Witness books that
yes,
I've read. Yeah,
yes,
it's a very balanced take. It's very heartfelt,
yes.
and just her talking through her lens of experience, and it doesn't feel like an attack in any way on the Jehovah's Witnesses. But at the same time, it's like,
And it feels so genuine.
hmm,
I
yes,
feel like, and it's been a little bit since I read it, so if you recall it a little bit better, then please absolutely correct me. But from my memory with the book, she did have moments of cognitive dissonance,
Yeah.
even as like a full on
Mm-hmm.
preemie.
Yeah.
And it was those little moments that afterwards, when she let herself sit with it, when doing
Mm-hmm.
the language and the tutoring and the language learning in China, is when everything started to unravel. And I also feel like it was like that with me. Like I was like, this needs to be it. This
Mm-hmm.
has to be it. But I still had my own cognitive dissonance
Mm-hmm.
of little things like, why can't we? Why? It never made sense to me how we were always told to only do research in the online library or on jw.org. Because in any other aspect of life, you do not only go to one source
Yeah.
for information. So that was always, since I was in school, something that just, and I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent on that. But the point is, it's someone who was fully preemie,
Mm-hmm.
still had those moments of cognitive dissonance, and then everything just,
Yeah.
and I felt like that was my life. Fully
Mm-hmm.
preemie, still had those moments, and then everything.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same. I mean, it's such a relatable story and
Yes.
experience, and just her way of telling it is just beautiful, of her journey through that experience. So,
And I feel like her book, nothing felt angry.
right.
It,
Yeah.
it it didn't come from a place of anger necessarily, or hurt with like
Mm-hmm.
toward. It was all very personal, and like,
Yeah.
this is what happens, because I've read other
Mm-hmm.
ex-JW books, or listened to other things, and everyone has their right for their feeling,
Yeah.
100%. I just know what works for me to be able to take in, and what doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And when the information I'm receiving, I can tell comes from an angry source, I can't take that in
Mm-hmm.
myself, because it's not going to resonate.
Yeah. Yep.
I
Same
am
here.
angry about things, but I don't want to
Of
always
course.
be.
Yeah. And some anger is justified, obviously, everyone, but
Yeah.
yeah, as far as reading a 200-page tirade up against the organization, it's like, it's not my thing either. If that helps
Right.
you, go for
And
it. But
that might be the place where you are in your healing journey,
yeah,
where
right.
you need that, where you need to know that other people, that you're not,
Yeah.
like Lisa was saying, that you're not alone in
Yep.
these feelings of being angry, of being hurt.
Yeah.
I'm not downing if that's what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a place where that is not what I need.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be part of your grieving process. Let's put it
Yep.
that way. One of those emotions is anger, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amber. Again, we
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
She's like, yeah, I'm living
Honestly.
life. I'm not watching Ex-Jehovah's Witness YouTube videos anymore.
She's
But
like, I processed. I'm good. I'm glad it
yeah,
helped
I'm
you
good. Yeah, I'll
guys.
see you guys later.
No,
No.
and I'm sure if she did hear this, she would be appreciative of the fact
Yeah,
that, like,
yeah.
it helped, because that's honestly the place where I want to get to,
Yeah.
where the fact that I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses and ultimately decided to leave is not. Well, you know what? You and I have discussed this, where it's not a personality trait.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like she did a couple of interviews about it. Of course, I'm not, because as we're talking about it, it's like, I'm thinking, I'm like, I actually don't, like, I haven't checked in on any ex-Jehovah's Witness material in ages. So I don't know if she's done anything, but it felt like she kind of did her interviews, put the book out there, and then kind of like, kept on with life, I imagine. I don't know. So, yeah.
I think you're right. I actually, it's funny you said that you don't. I just recently found the, like, not courage necessarily, but I don't necessarily need this anymore. I actually
Yeah.
just left the XJW Reddit community,
Mm.
just because I finally felt like it completed its
Yeah.
purpose for me.
Yeah.
So I haven't really been too big on the XJW community lately because of that as well.
Yeah, and eventually this will just become something else podcast. Maybe at the way we're going. It's like,
I'd like to think that eventually it's going to get to the point where it's just healing overall.
Yeah.
And this is where it started for us. It was our healing for this specific big thing.
Yeah, that was kind of our catalyst, right? The change, and then recognize that we had something to heal from, because when you're in it, you don't realize that you need to heal. You think you're good, you're fine. But and then you leave, you're like, and then sometimes I feel like some of us still don't recognize that we have something to heal from. And I'm, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I'm as guilty as anybody, where it's like, okay, I left, now I'm fine. And then you realize, like, no, maybe not. I was like, I have things, and it's still, like we've talked about, it's always a continual process. Things are always going to come up, and you realize, like, I need to work on this and fix not fix it, but try some healing in this area of my life.
Yep. No, and it's
Hmm.
so funny when things trigger you and you don't even realize it, and then someone else will like call it like, "Whoa, where
Yeah.
did that come from?"
Hmm.
Um, because you're right. There are always things. It's like we talked about earlier. It is not linear
Yep. Yep.
by any stretch of the imagination.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very true. Well, I
Yeah.
have one more book.
Let's go.
One more. Can I? And
Yeah,
I'm just gonna just this author in general, Rebecca Solnit. This is a field guide to getting lost.
I feel like
And
you've mentioned this book to me before.
I shared a quote. Actually, the quote I'm going to read, I shared with
Oh,
you.
okay. All right. There it
So
is.
she writes a lot of memoir, but she's also a historian. So there's always like her own story. There's stories from history, and then she just gives her reflections on basically how these things tie into our life, our journey, our own changes. I'm going to see if I can find a quote here. It's a partial quote. I'm kind of taking it from a paragraph. If you read it in context, it's even more impactful. But I mean, I just thought about this for myself. If I can find it. Ooh, yes. So again, I'm just kind of jumping in here, so bear with me. But listen as she kind of develops the thought. She goes, but the real difficulties, the real arts of survival seem to lie in more subtle realms. There's what's called for, there's what's called for is a kind of resilience of the psyche, a readiness to deal with what comes next. These captives lay out in a stark and dramatic way what goes on in every life, the transitions whereby you cease to be who you were. Seldom is it as dramatic, but nevertheless, something of this journey between the near and the far goes on in every life. Sometimes an old photograph, an old friend, an old letter will remind you that you are not who you once were. For the person who dwelt among them, valued this, chose that, wrote thus, no longer exists. Without noticing it, you have traversed a great distance. The strange has become familiar, and the familiar, if not strange, at least awkward or uncomfortable, an outgrown garment. And some people travel far more than others. There are those who receive as birthright inadequate or at least unquestioned sense of self, and those who set out to reinvent themselves for survival or for satisfaction and travel far. Some people inherit values and practices as a house they inhabit. Some of us have to burn down that house, find our own ground, build from scratch, even as a psychological metamorphosis. So that's the quote. So, I mean, that to me is, does
The
that ever happen to
part,
you where you pull up
the
a
part,
photograph of yourself as a Jehovah's Witness
I don't recognize. I don't know her.
and you're like, who was, I know that's me, but who was that person? And that awkwardness, that discomfort she's talking about kind of bubbles up, right? Like you're like,
Yes.
that was
The
so familiar to me.
outgrowing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was so familiar to me. That felt so comfortable when I was in it.
Yes.
And now it just seems awkward and like different. And to me, that just like, I read that quote and I was like, wow, I just
Hmm.
thought about it. I'm like, just that. Yeah, it's like we inherited that house, right? She says
Hmm.
of maybe not questioning it in the beginning, and at some point you realize like I have to burn down that house. Like I can no longer inhabit
Yeah.
this identity, and so her
I think
books
that
there's
that
just
really ties with what we were literally just
yeah,
talking about too.
yes, definitely. In her books, there's a lot of that, like just, and it's not that she was a, again, that's the thing. It's like experience can be so universal without someone ever being a Jehovah's Witness because
Yep.
people, whether it's the relationships change or whatever it is in their life, they go through
Hmm.
shifts, and some of them are huge shifts that has to do with a death or a relationship ending, a marriage ending, moving from one place to another, whatever it is.
Hmm.
And so everyone's dealing with that process on one level or another, and like she is. So if, you read her books, there's nothing in there about Jehovah's Witnesses, but you can just like that quote, you read it and you're like,
Yep.
I get it, I get it.
Yep.
That's me, like that. I
Right.
experienced that.
Right. Exactly. And it's those feelings that you experience.
Hmm.
That is the thing that ties us all together.
Yeah.
It's like maybe our actual experiences tweaked a little bit different, and maybe
Hmm.
no one has the full same actual experience, right?
Yeah.
But the feelings associated with that experience, the things that it brings up for you, the
Mhm.
memories, the trauma, the joy, what have you. All of those things are things that we all experience, and that's what brings us together. And that's why we can still, yeah, I went through something similar, but it was still a little bit different, but I felt the same. That's why
Yeah.
we're able to do that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
I mean, those are a few books that and a few
Yeah.
authors I found very helpful.
Same here.
We wanted to plug that in, or might probably more as we go on to of other things, other resources we found that are helpful, and we'll try to share those with everybody as we go.
And if anyone has any recommendations on books that have helped them heal, or just something that has helped you heal in this
Hmm.
process, Bo and I are both, I mean, we both love books. We obviously we've discussed this before, so
Hmm.
that was one of the reasons why this particular episode was going to be so important to us. Um, we want to know what helps you guys too.
Yeah, definitely. So feel free to share with us,
Mhm.
and you can share with us. Where can they share with us?
I think they have a couple of different ways. They can share with us on our Instagram page, which I need to resuscitate. On our YouTube channel. And do we have an email also?
No, we don't have an email.
We don't have an email. I thought we
we,
had.
we we got rid of the email. Just DM us on Instagram. Sorry, everyone. Snapchat. No Snapchat.
No
Sorry.
Snapchat.
No WhatsApp.
Instagram and YouTube
Yeah.
at the Reconstructionists, at the dot Reconstructionists.
The dot reconstructionist. That's right. Yeah, hit us up, and we are, believe it or not, we are trying to work on the technical side of this podcast. So
We are,
appreciate your
I'm
patience,
actually really
everyone.
proud of us. We
Yeah,
we put out an episode a couple weeks ago, and we're putting this out
here we
now.
are. Yes, yeah.
Look at
So
us.
I know we're gonna pat ourselves on the back, everybody. Oh, there we go. Nice, nice. Give yourself a pat in the back too if you left the Jehovah's Witnesses and you are
And
living
you're and
life.
you're and you're healing and you're
You're
doing good. And
healing.
you know what? You're doing good. I promise you.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thanks
Yeah.
everybody for watching and hopefully listening. Audio podcast forthcoming.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.